MJ Brodie, aka Jay, is the former president of the Baltimore Development Corporation. He is currently a columnist for the Baltimore Business Journal, where he writes on a host of issues from transportation to real estate development to schools. In this interview with CPHA, Jay is speaking on his own behalf and not for the BDC or for the Baltimore Business Journal. Jay, my first question for you is Baltimore's transit system, as you discussed in a recent article, is not currently an integrated system. How does the Red Line project begin to address that concern? And after the Red Line, what gaps will continue to remain in that integration?
Well, I would say, to begin, we don't have a transit system in Baltimore. We have a line, it's called a subway. We have another line called light rail. They don't even mesh very well together. And of course, we have buses, lots. And sometimes I wonder if the bus system really was designed to follow the former streetcar lines, which I grew up with long ago, or if it had really been rethought as to where the bus needed users are and how do they get to work and how do they get to school and how do they get to that. So I wouldn't say Baltimore has a system of transit or transportation, but I would also say we very much need a system. It is our Achilles heel, in my view, both as a city and as a region. And we not only need the Red Line, which I believe is essential, because the major traffic problem in Baltimore has always been east-west traffic. Not that the Jones Falls is wonderful, but it's better than not having it. And north-south has worked pretty well. East-west is a nightmare, generally. And so the Red Line as an idea to connect two great centers of employment, Woodlawn and Social Security on the west and Hopkins Bayview on the east, and serve downtown and neighborhoods at the same time, is an essential line. And I would hope that everybody in elected office understands that and does their best, because funding is a highly competitive business, and our friends in Washington, and they are our friends, are very keen on what's called the Purple Line, which is essentially a suburban rail line, which would augment their wonderful WMATA system, which I had the pleasure of riding for 12 years when I worked in Washington. And I don't aspire that Baltimore will have a WMATA system, because the money that funded it, essentially federal money, is in much short supply. But Baltimore needs the Red Line, and then it needs to think beyond the Red Line. So beyond the Red Line, in my view, is more light rail, and even potentially the expansion of the subway that currently ends at Hopkins on Broadway, which if you look at old pictures of maps called Baltimore Transit System, a great idea, it was extending that line up into northeast Baltimore to at least to Morgan State University, and potentially out into the county toward Joppatown. That would serve both the city well, with Morgan State and other people, but it would also be a relief valve for I-95, which is in gridlock every morning and can only get worse. So that would be a good thought. But then beyond those things which seem the most obvious to me, the Red Line and the extension of the current subway system, for us to really have an integrated, I'd rather use the word transportation system. So to integrate something like bus rapid transit, which is occurring in many areas of the country, to integrate thinking, new thinking, like zip cars, which has come to Baltimore and is doing very well, and to look at patterns that are very different today than they were even 10 years ago. For example, you get on the light rail in the morning in Baltimore downtown, and it's filled going out to Hunt Valley. That was not a pattern that people thought about 10, 15 years ago. And there's many people now living in one county around Baltimore, working in another. And how do you do that? Well, you get on the Beltway. And there's not much room left in the Beltway, although the O'Malley administration is talking about one more lane between Frederick Road and Route 40, but that's probably it. So there needs to be some comprehensive thinking, some strategic thinking, and some creative thinking, and not just going back to the old drawings and say, we'll create a green line and a blue line and whatever, but really saying we probably can't do that, but we can proceed toward an integrated transportation system that makes not only the city but the region competitive competitive with other regions in America.
Great. You answered a lot of our questions, so I have two follow-ups out of that. And the first is, so you talk about some of this low-hanging fruit. We could extend the circulator to Towson, public-private partnership improvements around Penn Station. This is low-hanging fruit that you suggest we should be going after right now. Are we not? And what's the holdup there? Is it silos in government? Is it lack of citizen involvement? Is it lack of political will? Or is this something you see happening in Baltimore?
Well, I'm just a citizen now, and an occasional writer, and I don't see the sort of groundswell of public opinion, maybe I'm just not aware of it, and it's there, that the importance of this transportation issue is one of the key things that's going to make Baltimore a successful city and region in the future, or it won't, if it's not taken advantage of. And I think we need a similar effort by citizens, groups like CPHA, groups like the Greater Baltimore Committee and the Economic Alliance, coming together with a real agenda and put that in front of the mayor and the county executives and the governor. The governor and the legislature took an important, very important step forward in the last legislature and passed a bill which for the first time really provides some methodical transportation funding over the years. And there's supposed to be a report out of that group by December of this year to kind of get down more specifics on funding. But my favorite example to emulate in the U.S. is Denver, in which the former mayor, John Hickenlooper, now the governor, and a geologist and a restaurant and bar owner, never run for office, was convinced to run for mayor of Denver, won, and said, looking around Denver, Denver won't realize its full potential unless it's seen as a region, and the key to that is an integrated transportation system. So although they had lost a referendum once, before Mr. Hickenlooper was mayor, he went out and talked to each county executive one by one, said we're all in this together, how do we formulate a plan and a set of implementation and action plan to make this happen? The second time the referendum passed, they're under construction on a regional light rail system called Fast Tracks, which is going to make Denver easy to move around. And the other part we didn't talk about yet is the economic development aspect of transportation. Besides literally transportation, I've been asked in the past why we don't have more TOD, the shorthand for transit-oriented development in Baltimore. And I said, because we don't have enough transit. If we had enough transit, we then start to look at rail stops, maybe even important bus transfer times and places, and that's where a developer wants to be. And to think about how that makes a region work better in a more urban, dense pattern, which you're not only seeing now in Baltimore, you're seeing in Towson, you're seeing in Hunt Valley, you're even seeing in clusters around the airport.
So can you move in on can we focus on the Red Line there specifically? Can you talk about what the Red Line will do from an economic development and a jobs perspective?
Well, moving around Baltimore, particularly if you're a person who doesn't have a car, is too hard. And so I know people personally, and I've seen studies that say people try to use the bus system, but it either doesn't get them to where they want to go, or it's not on a reliable schedule, or whatever. So light rail, there's no question, should be reliable on a schedule, not polluting, good environmental solution, no downside that I'm aware of, and potentially 80% federal money while it's still available. And we should be, the mayor, the Secretary of Transportation for the state, Jim Smith, who's recently appointed and very experienced, terrific county executive, they should be walking the halls in Washington and emphasizing how important this funding, which has gotten preliminary approval, but preliminary approval is not final approval. Final approval means here's the check. And I would hope that they are walking the halls in the Department of Transportation in Washington and in the executive branch and saying this is critical to the future of the city and making that case. And also making sure that our wonderful Maryland delegation, Senators Mikulski and Cardin, and Elijah Cummings and John Sarbanes, and all of them are very much up on the city's need for the Red Line, where it stands, who are the crucial decision makers, and
So do you see, with the purple line now on the table too, and talk of it being somewhat in competition with the red line, do you see any hesitation from our elected officials at the moment?
I don't know that I see hesitation. I would like to see more visibility. And just where does this stand on the agenda, of which there's always lots of things for people in office to think about. I would put this very high on the agenda and make it make our presence extremely visible and articulate.
Great. So I have one other question about low-hanging fruit. When you talk about all these smaller things we should be pursuing, Baltimore also seems behind the curve in terms of a bike share program. Obviously, our neighbor DC has a great bike share program. New York just rolled one out 2 months ago. Chicago did the same. Do you perceive that as low-hanging fruit the city should be pursuing as well?
Well, I think they are. I mean, I see bike trails. I have an old knee, so I'm not with a little tear in it, so I'm not a bike rider. But I see more and more of it. It is low-hanging fruit, as is the circulator. The circulator was a terrific idea, and I should say, for the record, was not my idea. But as soon as I heard it, I said, what a creative idea. I hope we can do that. And it's been extended and extended. There's been very little problems with it. My only qualm at the beginning was, could it really work for free? And would people take advantage of that and do antisocial things that would not be good? As far as I hear, there's very little of that. And the ridership has been excellent. So I would hope that gets extended all the way up to University Parkway, up Charles Street at a certain point, and maybe even beyond. It's something that works, and I failed to mention it in my earlier comments. I'm glad you brought it up.
Thanks for sharing that. So I'm going to move topics here, unless there's anything else you want to add on the red line.
Well, the only other thing I would add on the red line is the benefit to neighborhoods. I talked about the employment centers. There are neighborhoods in Baltimore that are doing fine. Canton, Fells Point, Federal Hill comes to mind, and Canton and Fells Point will be served by the red line. There are neighborhoods in Baltimore that are unwell. Harlem Park comes to mind, where I spent some time in recent months meeting with people and saying, what's going on here? And they say, well, buildings are crumbling, and there's no plan that people seem to know about. Well, the red line would be a future opportunity to orient Harlem Park, which is Fremont Avenue and Fulton and Franklin Mulberry and Lafayette, that's its dimensions. It's a sizable neighborhood. To a red line, and say this is our new front door, and come on developers, this is a new opportunity to invest in a Harlem Park that will have a different orientation and a sense of energy moving forward to the future. So I would hope the city, the mayor and the city planning department would see those kind of opportunities and not have their vision restricted to it's a red line and it's a line on a map and here's a station, so there's some transit-oriented development. But looking beyond those immediate opportunities to an area like Harlem Park and saying, how can the red line help revitalize areas like